This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome, everyone, to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Pauline, and today I have a lot I want to talk about to you guys. We have a lot of basketball to discuss, some boxing history to discuss, a lot of wins to discuss. So, there's just a lot to discuss. So first off, I want to jump straight into the NBA and give you guys an update on the games from last night. Now, the Spurs had a really historic, they had a big win last night that placed them on the road to clinch a historic record. So we're going to get into that win. We're also going to discuss the win that placed UConn women's basketball program at a whole new milestone and height of achievement that has really never been done before. And then I want to talk about the great Sugar Ray Robinson to wrap up this Valentine's Day episode. It's not really a Valentine's Day theme because we're not talking about love today. We are just talking straight sports. And then I also want to discuss some developments in the New York Knicks saga, as well as some news when it comes to boxing. So there's quite a little bit of things to discuss today. So I'm going to jump right into it. And I probably will give you guys an updated just a lot of updates. There's a lot going on today. So first off, I wanted to discuss the games that were played last night in the NBA. There were quite a few big games. So I want to touch on some of the biggest games to look that took place last night. So the Oklahoma City Thunder went to go to Washington, D.C. to play the Washington Wizards. They lost to them 98-120. So a really tough loss for the Oklahoma City Thunder. You know, we really got to get them. They really got to get it together as far as wanting to do well right now. And I know that there's probably a lot of emotions that, as far as with Russell Westbrook, and I'm really interested to see, this is kind of like a little bit of a tangent, but I'm really interested to see how it's going to be during All-Star Week with Durant and his squad, which is basically half of the West side, the West NBA All-Star, but yeah, the West side. And then we have Russell, and they had that big, Ben and I discussed that yesterday, their game from this weekend. And so I'm really, really interested. And then we have Steve Kerr is the coach. It's going to be interesting. I don't know if they can brush it off that soon. Because there's a lot of hard feelings over and some saltiness still sitting in between not only just Kevin Durant now and Russell Westbrook, but just the whole team as far as the Warriors are concerned, because, you know, they got Kevin Durant's back. And then also, so one, that this, you know, I feel like this wound is still fresh. And then also two, because Russell, he's kind of outnumbered in a way. I'm sure, I know he can hold his own, and I'm not saying that they're going to fight or anything like that, but I'm just interested to see the chemistry, if there is any, and if it's going to be obvious that there isn't any, or are they going to just pretend like nothing's wrong just for the weekend for us fans, or do us fans want there to be some pettiness going on? I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be fun either way. I'm really excited for the All-Star game. I love the All-Star week. I personally like all the other, like the dunk contest, the skills challenge, 3-point contest. Like, I like those games more, but I'm really interested to see how it's going to be as far as attitude and Russell just not passing the ball to any of the Warriors within the Warriors, or basically the rest of the team. But I mean, I guess he's used to that. So we'll see. Anyway, so the Thunder lost to the Wizards 98-120. We had the Celtics defeating the Mavericks last night, 111-98. Isaiah Thomas, he had 29 points, 1 rebound, and 8 assists in that game. And speaking of losses, the Warriors took a loss to the Denver Nuggets. This is their number 9 loss of the season. They only lost 9 games the entire season last season. So they've, matched that as far as the L category. I'm interested to see if they'll lose any more. But the Warriors lost to the Nuggets, like I said, 110-132. Kevin Durant, 25 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists in that loss to the Nuggets. Nikola Jokic, he had 17 points, 21 rebounds for that guy over there, and 12 assists. And then we also had a really fun game of overtime. The Atlanta Hawks and the Trailblazers, 109-107. The Atlanta Hawks outscored the Trailblazers in overtime, 12 points to 7. Paul Millsap securing his spot in Atlanta. He's not going anywhere. They're saying 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists for him. CJ McCollum, he had 26 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists. So those were some of the big games from last night. Oh, but let me not forget the Spurs. So the Spurs, they defeated the Indiana Pacers 110-106. Kawhi Leonard, 32 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Paul George, he had 27 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. And that is going to make the record overall this season for the Spurs 42-13, which makes this season their 20th straight winning season. So they've had winning seasons for the last 20 seasons ever since Tim Duncan was a rookie back in 1997-98 season. And now, so his entire time with the Spurs, they were on a winning season streak, and now one more season after his retirement. And that record was previously set with 19 straight winning seasons by Utah. So it's really exciting. We're going to talk, like I said earlier in the podcast, a lot about winning, because UConn has basically taught us all what a winning season legacy program looks like. And so we're going to get into that later on in the episode. But first, I want to take it to our first break of the episode. Then we're going to come back, talk about college basketball, talk about winning basketball and UConn's women's basketball program. And then we're going to shift gears out of basketball. But we still got to discuss a little bit of the New York Knicks. I want to tell you guys some juice with that. And then we're going to switch gears to boxing. And I'm going to give you guys a little history lesson, I guess you could say, with today being Valentine's Day and Mr. Sugar Ray Robinson. So keep it locked here. You're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. I'm Pauline, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back, everyone, to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Pauline, and before we shift gears into college basketball, I wanted to discuss a tad bit more in the NBA. So if you've been listening to both the sports podcast, and then we also have a basketball podcast in which Ben and I host that one as well, this same network basketball podcast, so the GSMC basketball podcast, we have been discussing, it seems like these last few weeks, the New York Knicks, and most recently the New York Knicks, Dolan, and Charles Oakley. So there's been, and just to catch you guys up to speed, if you guys don't know what's happening, so Charles Oakley, who is a former Knicks player, was removed from the arena in which he was watching last Wednesday. He was forcibly removed by security. There was a really big, it was a hot mess. It didn't look good for either parties. He was arrested. He was charged with 3 counts of misdemeanor assault and 1 count of misdemeanor trespassing. And then James Dolan, who owns the Knicks, he said that he was going to be banned indefinitely from the Knicks home arena, which is Madison Square Garden. And there's been a lot of backlash. Dolan has also suggested that very publicly and as direct, he's being indirect but very direct all at the same time, and basically saying that Charles Oakley has a drinking problem as well, so that's kind of like a taint on Charles Oakley's character. And then it's just been a mess because you also have fans that are not happy with the way that it was carried out, and you don't really understand. And there's been interviews with both parties, both saying different things. So hopefully, and then yesterday we discussed how Latrell Sprewell was invited to the Knicks game as a guest of Dolan's. And so it's just been a lot of ridiculousness in the Knicks organization besides their problems between Phil Jackson and Carmelo Anthony. So we've been discussing that in previous weeks. Well, at least the last week we have been discussing, especially this Charles Oakley, James Dolan situation. So I wanted to give you guys one more quick update as of today. So it was released in a statement by the NBA that Commissioner Adam Silver as well as Michael Jordan had a conference with Charles Oakley and James Dolan. So Oakley, Dolan, and Adam Silver met on Monday at the NBA headquarters with Michael Jordan in by phone. So he wasn't there physically, but he was over the phone. And so Charles Oakley and Michael Jordan, and if it seems weird to you that Michael Jordan would be involved in this, because it kind of seemed kind of weird to me too at first, but Charles Oakley and Michael Jordan have a really close relationship. So he was kind of more of an advocate and support for Charles Oakley, and to kind of, help speak to Charles Oakley too, because, you want somebody to get through to someone who they trust as well. So they had so they met yesterday and they were discussing what happened, and both Dolan and Oakley, according to Adam Silver, were both apologetic about the incident and their negative impact, of course, on the Knicks organization and the NBA. And I think that that's again why Adam Silver stepped into, because this is just not a good look regardless, and this is something that they got to nip in the bud before it becomes kind of like precedent in the NBA as well. And so they were saying that they want to reach a resolution, which is really, really good, and that they are sincere in working this out, which is really good because, again, it's just not a good look for the Knicks. They have other issues. It's not a good, not a good look for the NBA. It's not a good look for Dolan. It's really not a good look for how owners, that relationship between owners and former superstars, former legends, especially superstars, legends, and stars for specific organizations, and how they treat former players and things like that. That's definitely, especially this late in the game. Charles Oakley is no longer a player, so he kind of deserves some respect as for what he did for the Knicks organization and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see, because now it looks like Dolan has also extended an invitation to Charles Oakley to be a guest at Madison Square Garden. So I hope this means that he is no longer banned for life. And that I think Charles Oakley should take him up on the offer. He should get all of, because myself, along with a lot of others of us, are on Charles Oakley's side. And there was talks by, of course, Dolan's camp saying that Charles Oakley was being very rude and verbally aggressive and cursing and things like that during the game, that first half of the game, and just being really verbally aggressive. And of course, Charles Oakley, he does deny that. So I guess we'll never really know exactly what happened that caused such a big scene. We'll always just have the image of the scene of Charles Oakley kind of like shoving the security guard. And it's just so sad that that's something that is prominent and being replayed over and over again in basketball news right now. So hopefully it'll get resolved, and this is the start of a New York Knicks resolution. It's really interesting that Phil Jackson is so worried about repairing this relationship, but he's not worried about repairing his relationship with Carmelo Anthony. But that's just me, and that's just my little shameless little piece that I had to throw in there, my 2 cents in regards to that. So anyways, we are going to jump into college basketball, and I wanted to touch on college basketball real quickly. So we have the new college basketball polls. We have number 1 sitting pretty for the 3rd straight week, Gonzaga. They are still undefeated with a record of 26-0. Villanova is number 2. Kansas sitting at number 3. We have Baylor number 4. Arizona sitting at number 5. UCLA number 6. Sitting at number 7 is Oregon. Louisville took the 8th slot, was Virginia number 9. North Carolina rounding up that top 10. Wisconsin had 11. Duke at 12. Kentucky at 13. Virginia 14. We have Florida sitting at the 15th slot. Purdue took 16th. Florida State had 18. And surprise, Cincinnati has the 18th slot. They've dropped way down after losing to SMU. And SMU, surprise and excitement for SMU fans, you guys jumped up from the 25th seed, 25th rank, whatever, 25th slot, to now number 19. So you guys are over Creighton, sitting at 20, 21 South Carolina. St. Mary's is 22. Maryland, 23. Butler is at 24. And Notre Dame rounds out the top 25 as of this week. So, again, I'm excited for March Madness. I want to go see some March Madness. Anything can happen when it comes to basketball, when it comes to March Madness, which makes the college basketball playoff situation tournament the most exciting in all of sports, if you ask me, because again, anything can happen. It's a one and done. It's not a series. You don't get a second chance. You don't get to come back and, you don't get to come back from a loss tomorrow night and try to beat them 2 more games in a row. So that's what I love about the NCAA March Madness College Championship basketball. And of course, it doesn't matter. As long as you get into the tournament, you can be ranked, like I said earlier, you could be ranked really low and defeat a number 1, number 2 seeded team. And hey, everybody loves a great upset, right? Unless you're seeded number 1. So we'll see what happens with that. And then when we come back, I wanted to discuss UConn basketball, women's basketball program, as well as, like I said, a little Valentine's Day history lesson. So keep it locked here. You are listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. I'm Pauline, and I will be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back, everyone, to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Pauline, and we're getting ready to wrap up this episode. But first, I want to give you guys some records and some history lessons to wrap up this episode. So the first thing that I want to discuss is UConn's women's basketball program. So last night, on Monday, they won their 100th consecutive game. They beat number 6 South Carolina 66-55. And surprisingly enough, UConn was only leading by 6 points at halftime, but pulled away really far in the third for an easy victory with them. Now, the reason why this is so amazing is that, one, they are now 25-0 this season, but overall they have had 100 consecutive wins. So it's been 818 days since their most recent loss. So that was back in November 2014, everyone, where they lost to Stanford, and who was actually ranked number 6 as well at that time. That was November 17th, when they lost to Stanford in their most recent loss, if you could say that was recent time. So it's pretty cool because we have John Wooden, who was on an 88 win streak when he set, with his historic legacy over in UCLA. But now this is a milestone that has not been achieved by anyone else, men's or women's, in the NCAA. There was a record set of 131 wins back when it was just AAU time. So I guess that's the next record for UConn, because it's basically when you sign as a female basketball player to you're basically signing that you are going to get, 1, a great education, 2, an amazing basketball experience, because you're not going to lose. You're just not. They don't lose. They don't know how to lose. I don't know what they would do if they did lose. If they suffered a loss, I don't even know how the girls would react. I don't know how the fans would react, because they don't ever lose. They haven't lost since November of 2014. They've had 4 consecutive national titles. They win. They always win. And the cool thing about it, they're not just winning barely. They're beating teams that are ranked. And they've only had, in this, 100 game winning streak, they've only had 2 games where the margin was less than 10 points. So they're beating teams by at least double digits every single time. So congratulations to UConn's women's basketball program in this historic feat. Now they have set the record and set the precedent on what it looks like to truly have a winning organization, a winning program over there. And so I wanted to jump into a little bit of history of Valentine's Day, because sports-wise, this is a really cool day. A lot of sports things happen, records and things like that have been historically set, or just great sporting events have taken place on Valentine's Day. So there's Valentine's Day for the love, and then there's Valentine's Day for the sports world. And if you're like me, we're more worried and concerned about the sports world and the sports side of Valentine's Day. So sticking kind of in this vein of basketball real quickly that we've had is that there is that infamous record and of the NBA scoring record that was broken in 1966. So on Valentine's Day, 1966, Wilt Chamberlain broke the NBA scoring record. So he actually, let's rewind to February 14, 1966. So he scored his points in that game. He had a great game that game, but that set him at 20,884 points. So it's pretty amazing because we still revere him as one of the highest scoring champions as far as with his career. He finished the career with 31,419 NBA points. That's what he set. But then at that time, it was a record. It has been passed by the likes of Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Karl Malone as well. But at that time, it was a really, really big deal. And he had just enough because the previous record before he set it broke that record back in 1966, it was set by Bob Pettit, and he had 20,880 points. So still a lot of points for him as well. And at that time, that's a lot. That was a whole lot. I know that we're used to, Michael Jordan, his record is 32,292. Kobe, 33,643. So I know that we have guys that are, the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar sitting pretty with 38,387 career points. So we're used to these high numbers, but that's because these records were set by the likes of Wilt Chamberlain before all these guys came around. You know what I'm saying? So that was a really cool feat for Wilt Chamberlain during that time. And then I wanted to end this episode with another history lesson. Sugar Ray Robinson and Jake LaMotta. So they had a total of 6 bouts. They went against each other 6 times. Okay. So, and they even joked that they met so many times in the ring that they should get married because they were always, it seemed like, training to compete against one another. And what has been known, so back in 1951, so Valentine's Day 1951, which has become known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which Sugar Ray Robinson went up against Jake LaMotta. So Sugar Ray, he weighed in at 155.5 pounds. Jake LaMotta, 160. And it was a fun and interesting and historic and pretty brutal, to be known later as a massacre for these two great boxers. So it took place in Chicago Stadium, Chicago, Illinois, and they fought in front of a crowd of 14,000, almost 15,000. And it was a really good fight. So the Associated Press scored the fight 8 rounds. So they went 13 of 15. Okay. And the Associated Press scored the fight 8 rounds for Robinson, 2 for LaMotta, and 2 even. So very, very good as far as, of course, it fell into the favor of Robinson. But anyway, so the United Press reported that there was at the close 8th round, and I'm quoting this, the United Press had LaMotta leading 6 rounds to 2. However, as LaMotta tired and Robinson concentrated on an up-sweeping attack of uppercuts, bolos, and shovel hooks against his bobbing opponent, Jake began to wither under the rising fire. So we do know that Sugar Ray Robinson ended up defeating him in the 13th round of 15. So a long bout between these two. And that was basically the last time that they fought as well against one another. So Sugar Ray Robinson basically gave him the business, and LaMotta did not want to see him again. And it was a really big deal because before, back in 1943, so LaMotta and Robinson, they had always gone against one another, and LaMotta, he was more rough and rude, whereas Sugar Ray Robinson was more classy and stylish. In and outside the ring, he was just more of that smooth type of guy. And then, so 1951, they have Sugar Ray and LaMotta, Chicago. This was their 6th occasion that they had gone against one another. And it's basically was one of those things where you basically always had Sugar Ray beating LaMotta, except for in 1943, when LaMotta actually beat Sugar Ray Robinson and stopped, like he ended a 14 straight win streak for Robinson. So that's got to count for something, okay? And so it was a lot of, and you guys can actually still, if you guys Google it, you guys can watch. It's really grainy and terrible quality compared to what we have now, but you could watch this historic St. Valentine's Day massacre fight. And that's just like the cool thing about technology now. And even though these things were recorded such a long time ago, we can still enjoy them now and watch some of these historic events that took place in sports history, especially on a day like today, on Valentine's Day. So there's more to do than just be lovey-dovey. You guys can read up on other Valentine's Day historic sporting events. So that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Pauline, and you have been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Have a great day.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch, whatever it may be.